Welcome to the Gorgeous Gray podcast. I am Nicole Scott, your host, registered holistic nutritionist, rest mindset coach, author of the Gorgeous Gray movement, and the co-creator of the Menopause Reset program. In this podcast, we have real conversations about aging as a woman and all the pressure and uncertainty we feel as we head into menopause and beyond. Let's face it, aging is not an easy conversation to have. But I say it's time to talk about the messy middle and offer hope when we feel like giving up on ourselves. Let's talk about our fears around gray hair, our muffin tops, and even our dry, itchy vaginas and everything in between. I will help you reconnect to your feminine energy and offer real solutions from experts in their field to navigate aging as a woman. I believe we, as women, deserve to shine even brighter in this next chapter of life. So with a sense of humor and a lot of compassion, let's dive into these vulnerable conversations. Hello, wonderful ladies. Dr. Cindy Sholes is in the house today. Thank you, Cindy, for being here.
Thank you for inviting me, Nicole. I'm super excited to be part of this conversation.
Yes, we go way back. I think you and I got introduced about 17 years ago in our other wellness business, and I've been watching you and seeing how you've been growing in your personal practice, and then you're now the co-founder of rREST, and we'll dive into that a little bit later. But just so you know who Dr. Cindy Sholes is, she's got her PhD in neuroscience from the UCSS, which Cindy's telling me is one of the most prestigious, places to go to school to learn about neuroscience. So that's pretty impressive. And then I know that, Cindy, you have a lot of different other designations related to brain health and, supporting the whole body, including being a hypnotherapist, and you have your own private practice, and you're thriving. You wear many hats, I know. And you taught me through the pandemic when I went back to school. So I'm just so grateful that you are here today, because today, ladies, what we're going to do is we're going to obviously touch on the whole aging topic. But with her background, we want to go into a place today where we can talk about brain health and the change into this new stage in life, which is this menopause. And, menopause is going to potentially be half of your life. And we want to live a really good long half of our life. And I know that Dr. Cindy is going to give us some good perspective of the shift that is happening for us and how we can better support mind, body, soul. But before we dive in, let's talk a little bit about your personal story. So you're in the menopause stage.
Yes.
What has it been like for you?
Yeah, so I'm postmenopausal now, have been. I think, I wish I'd written it down. And honestly, for those of you guys who are going into menopause, write down somewhere. So it's so nice to know what year you went into menopause, because I can't even frankly remember. But it's been, at least 4 or 5 years since I've been in menopause, and there were probably 10 years of perimenopausal stuff happening for me. And it's been quite a journey. And what's interesting to me is that nobody ever talked about, I had many female relatives that were going through it when I was growing up, and nobody talked about it. And so I had no model of conversation around menopause, except for the contemporary friends that I had, some of which were ahead of me and some of which were behind me, and so forth. And I have to say that because what happened to me in menopause, and I think this is probably common for a lot of people, is it's my body was changing radically in a lot of ways, and my hormones were changing a lot. And so my feelings and how I was able to deal with the things showing up in my life was starting to change. So the ways that I dealt with my life prior to going into perimenopause, certainly they weren't working anymore. And I kind of had to find other ways to handle stuff. And a lot of it was, in fact, it was, I look at it now Nicole, like it
Yeah.
was a blessing,
Mm.
because what I kind of discovered, starting with, you know, post pregnancy
Mm.
stuff, but really and I had my children kind of late, so it
Yeah.
wasn't that long after I had my kids that I started going into having perimenopausal
Right.
stuff.
Yeah.
What I realized is that the hormonal shifts caused me to be a little bit more raw emotionally.
Mm.
And the way that I had handled my emotions prior
Yeah.
was not effective anymore. And I
Mm.
had a lot of emotional dysregulation showing up in my life. And I had
Mm.
to grapple with, how do I not be a horrible person, frankly. And when my kids were teenagers
Yeah.
going through puberty, and I was going through, kind of like this tail end of
Yeah.
perimenopause, it was when it was the most challenging, because
Mm.
I knew to be the best mom I needed to
Yeah.
be, that I needed to be able to regulate my emotions to be able to support my children in learning how to
Right.
regulate their emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really brought all my training in
Mm.
neuroscience, um, and then my training in hypnotherapy to the
Yeah.
table to say, okay, like, I need help.
Yeah.
What can I do to not be reactive? Because what
Right.
I think happens for us as women is that we our brains actually work differently depending
Mm.
upon the hormonal fluctuations that are going on in our bodies, right?
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
isn't just about menopause, it's about the hormonal fluctuations that
Mm-hmm.
occur throughout our lives for different kinds of reasons,
Yeah.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
so as those hormonal fluctuations happen, it actually changes the way our brain works.
Mm-hmm.
And there are times where that sort of logical brain that like knows how to like think things through, get things done, that sort of quick pace like that,
Yeah.
it's not working as well. And
Right.
and what's more effective for us
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
this sort of more subtle wisdom of the body, wisdom
Mm.
of our emotions. And that's what sort of is available to us. I had never practiced with that prior to having kids and using any of that as a source of wisdom. I
Yeah.
didn't know how to handle it.
Right.
So that's what I learned. And then I learned a technique that you're familiar with, Nicole, rest,
Yeah.
to support myself first and then my clients.
Mm.
When your logical mind that is trying to think things through and make the best decisions based on, logic and all that, when that's not
Mm-hmm.
working, what shows up in replace of that is
Mm-hmm.
our stress responses and our emotions and all of
Mm.
that. And if we don't
Yeah.
apply wisdom to that, then then we become driven from
Right.
past experiences we
Mm-hmm.
learned from childhood
Yeah.
that may not be appropriate to our everyday life.
Yeah.
So for me, it was really like, how do I learn how to process that old stuff
Mm. Mm-hmm.
and get it out in a way
Yeah.
so that I can actually use the wisdom of my body, the wisdom of my
Mm.
emotions in a
Mm-hmm.
way that is effective for my adult self. So it was really a
Mm-hmm.
growing up. Menopause has been
Mm.
really a forced growing up. Like, I didn't grow up into an
Wow.
adult until I started going through menopause.
Wow. And then would you say like the biggest transformation of the growing up was the rest technique?
I think it really was,
Okay.
because that was the technique that allowed me to get into these places in my sort of mind
Yeah.
body that were hidden
Mm-hmm.
underneath that logical mind that I didn't really know were there, but
Mm.
were kind of showing up when
Yeah.
my hormones were fluctuating, like, that sort of
Right.
rawness, like
Yeah.
that's what showed up to the surface.
Mm.
But then I felt, when that first started happening, I felt very
Yeah.
out of control.
Right.
And it
Yeah.
took me an understanding of, where was that coming from? That was coming from patterns I had learned as a child.
Mm.
And the reason why it felt out of control is because as a child, when I learned them, I was out of control.
Right.
And I learned these patterns to survive those experiences.
Yeah.
And the other reason why I felt so out of control is that those patterns weren't very functional in my adult world.
Right.
And I was yet compelled into the, triggered
Yeah.
in,
Yeah.
I don't know if you can relate to that, but
Oh, yeah. I mean, well,
reactive when we don't want to
yeah.
be.
Well, the awareness is, oh my gosh, where did that temper tantrum come from? Right? I'm 50 years old and I'm having a temper tantrum like my 2-year-old used to have, but really that 2-year-old is my inner 2-year-old that never healed or never dealt with the past, right? And it's an awareness. So let's dive in a little
Exactly.
bit because I think this is the first time the audience that's been following me is learning about rest. So what does rest stand for?
So rest spelled with two R's, and it stands for rapid reprogramming of emotional stress technique. So it's an acronym. Um, and it's really stands for this work that allows us to get access into that subconscious underneath the radar patterning we all have
Yeah.
and reprocess it, reprogram it so that it can be more effective when we have access to the wisdom
Right.
that the body and emotions can provide
So
for
you've
us.
been working on yourself with this technique, with other practitioners doing it on you. So how long have you
Yeah.
been working with others? Like, would you say 4 years, 5 years? How long have you been working
Well,
this
the
technique? And
technique has been being under development for at least 15,
okay,
actually, in some ways, coming close to 20.
wow,
So,
okay,
um, the way that it kind of played out is as a hypnotherapist, I would do trades with other people, but also that were other hypnotherapists, but also learned how to do self hypnosis. So,
yeah,
a lot of the times I would learn a technique and I would apply, if I could apply it to myself first, I
yeah,
would.
yeah,
And a lot of times that meant doing trades with other
hmm,
practitioners, but what I really loved is the autonomy of being able to learn how to do it for myself. And
yeah,
so I did that with hypnotherapy, with another technique called neuro emotional technique,
hmm,
NET, and just started putting together the things that were working for me.
yeah,
And I then would, put it together into something a little bit different. That's how
yeah,
rest kind of came about. It was like, I wanted to have the most efficient, the
yeah,
most effective,
hmm,
right? And the
yeah,
most accessible
yeah,
technique, the one that
yeah,
lasted the longest, right?
yeah,
And so
yeah,
it took a little bit from here and a little bit from there. And
hmm,
I tested it out on myself, on my clients,
yeah,
and then I started teaching other practitioners to do exactly that. And then I started, yes, it's so nice to have a rest trained coach who knows this
yeah,
technique to be working on me because we all have,
yeah,
including me,
yeah,
blind spots
yeah,
where I could work on myself, but there were so many things that I couldn't see that were just
yeah,
underneath my radar. Even though I
yeah,
tried to treat myself like my own client,
yeah,
still there was
yeah,
stuff under there that I just
yeah.
couldn't see. And a rest trained coach, even though I trained them, they can find things that I wouldn't be able to find within myself.
So amazing. Well, I'll share quickly my story because I got introduced to Russ a couple years ago and the pandemic kind of hit. And I was hearing rumblings in my circle about this rest. And I did my first session, probably a little bit resistant. Um, and I always think I'm an open person, but I don't know. There was just like, eh. And I did it. And I was like, I don't know if it worked. And so I didn't do anything about it for a couple months later, but the same kind of pattern was showing up again. And I got another opportunity to do my second session. And it was in that second session that magic really happened. It all started to just make sense for me as a client. And I remember the practitioner found a blind spot for me that there was no way that I would have been able to find it. It was just so deep and buried. And I cried the entire session. But with that, there was so much release. And then there was so much compassion for myself going, oh my gosh, this wasn't even me. This wasn't my shit. And then there was just like, I was just so awakened. And then to be able to release it and do Ho'oponopono and do the forgiveness on the people that were impacted, it was incredible. And so just so you know, for my listeners, I got so excited about what that second session did for me. I was like, I got to be a coach. I got to do this. So then I signed up and I haven't looked back. So, when people, and I think I just posted this on social media that I got my certificates. Thank you, Dr. Cindy Sholes. I got my certificates this week in the mail and I posted on social media to say, people took different paths in the pandemic. For me, I decided to upgrade and to be around like-minded people and to sharpen my pencil and to do the work. And I don't know how many sessions I had on myself personally, but man, did I ever have a lot of blind spots, and they still show up today. And thank goodness I'm a phone call away from a lot of health coaches that I can just say, help me, I need a rest session. Let's clear this blind spot and then move on. So let's dive in, Cindy, to talk a little bit more about rest so that the audience can understand a little bit more of the technique and how it works and how it might benefit some of these menopausal women that are really struggling and feeling shame, confusion, emotional upheaval, but they don't know why, right? I was like, when we slow down as women, when we start to, like, the kids start to move out, our period goes away, our hormones change, and we actually start to have a little bit more time in our calendar for the first time. And then all this emotional baggage just shows up on the front doorstep and you go, what the F is this? And then you either deal with it or you don't deal with it, or you don't know how to deal with it. So let's talk about maybe how rest could be a tool for women that are really struggling on this deep emotional level, especially when we head into this menopausal stage.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And I'm going to start with sort of like what doesn't seem to be particularly deep, but I think might be relatable for a lot of people. I don't know if it's relatable for a lot of people, but one of the things that I've been grappling with myself personally for the last 5 years since I've been into menopause is just how quickly, I'm going to bring it back to aging, but how quickly I've been aging. So when I was younger, I didn't have to worry so much about, makeup or how I looked or whatever, for a bunch of reasons, but mostly because frankly I was just young, and the expectation of society is that, you know, when you're young, you look enough like what we expect you to look like, that, there's you have a certain amount of, you don't have to play as much of that game, right?
Yeah.
Well, when I started menopause, I started looking at myself on video, and I'm like, I don't look the way I want to look. I don't look the way I perceive myself inside, or the way that I want the audience to perceive me.
Yeah.
And then I started getting a lot of emotion around that. And the emotion was an emotion of, I just wanted to hide. And then I knew I had these gifts to share with the world. And yet I felt this deep wanting to just like bury my head in the sand, because I couldn't stop the aging process. And like, do I want to, can people take me seriously as an old lady? As I showing up as an old lady, as I see myself now turning in that direction, right?
Yeah.
And I just had such mixed feelings about it, because I have so much honor and respect for my aunts and my grandmother and my mother as she's aging and doing beautifully and with such grace. So I have all this immense respect myself for that. But at the same time, I was having a hard time bringing that to me.
Right.
So rest came in really handy for me, right, at that point, right? Because I knew I was having emotions like about, bringing my gifts to the world, and I didn't really realize what it was about. Like, I just told you, like, oh, it was about this, me aging, but I kind of had those as separate conversations. I didn't really know in my head. Somebody had to help me with, well, there was a blind spot that was showing up from my past about me not feeling good enough, frankly, to play the part that I want to be playing.
Yeah.
And that had not come up when I was younger, but it was very much up with menopause. Um, and I knew that I didn't want to be stuck in the place of hiding,
Yeah.
not sharing what I think is really valuable.
Yeah.
And so the pain of that was more than like, and I knew I could get help. So I, so I think that, you know, a lot of people are living with more emotional upheaval than that, even,
Yeah.
right? I guess that's a trivial example,
Mm-hmm.
because rest can help when there's big examples like
Yeah.
the paralysis that comes from I've been working my whole life to support my family, my
Yeah.
children that are now at college that no longer need me,
Yeah.
and now I feel a sense of uselessness. I know
Mm-hmm.
a lot of women having that feeling,
Yeah.
and all of those feelings of inadequacy, whether it's a not good enough because I don't look the part,
Mm-hmm.
or I can't
Yeah.
produce the way that I was, I can't take
Yeah.
care of something. All of those feelings of inadequacy, they're all from the past.
Mm-hmm.
And rest can help identify what way it's coming up in your life,
Mm-hmm.
and then help identify what was the first time that, how did your little child self learn that and why?
Yeah.
And then bring compassion and processing to that inner child self.
Yeah.
And it's so important, like for me, it was, I'm pretty sure this whole thing about like how you look had
Yeah.
to do with something going on in nursery school, preschool. I went to nursery school from the age of 2. And, the judgment of my peers,
Mm.
and it had to do with my age at that time. Of course, I was, you know, 2 or 3, and then there were some kids that were 4 and were 5, right? And so it
Yeah.
wasn't about me being old, but it was about me not being old enough.
Right. Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
kind of funny how it's bringing that same kind of like, I can't participate in this because I'm not old enough, to
Yeah.
be, to be part of this game,
Right.
kind of showed up as an
Wow.
in my middle age,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
So
anyway,
amazing.
yeah, so sometimes our emotional upheaval isn't from a big trauma
Yeah.
either. It
Yeah.
could be from a smaller adversity that happened as
Mm-hmm.
childhood that's still carried forward, that may have been
Right.
really traumatic for you as a young child.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, the adults around us didn't see that as a
Yeah.
traumatic event at all. And even
Right.
me looking back at my own traumatic events, I wouldn't have ever thought that until I did a rest session. And then I go, gosh, that was really painful to be excluded from those
Right.
games because
Yeah.
I didn't have the age credentials or
Yeah.
the gender credentials.
Yeah.
It was usually the boys that were like, you're not old enough and you're a girl, and therefore you cannot play with us,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, so fascinating. One that just came to me that I just feel that I need to share is when I had gone through my divorce, and then, starting to date again, I was like, why don't I trust men? Like, they're all suspicious to me. They're like, it's like, nope, nope, something like I'm ready for the like carpet to get pulled out. And doing my rest session, I wanted to clear it, like to find out, why do I have this guard up? Why is like this like armor on? Like, why don't I trust? Because I couldn't pinpoint it. Like I wanted
Yeah.
to. And so I remember clearly that session that I went back to when I was 2 years old, and I was on the shoulders of my dad, and I fell off and I hit my head.
So he really let you down.
Yeah. But it was an accident. It was an
Yeah, of
innocent
course.
accident. Like, how many
Of
times have
course.
your kiddo, like, have they been on your back and they squirrel and like, don't squirrel or I'm going to drop you, don't squirrel. And the little 2-year-old pushes the envelope and boom, you fall.
Right.
But
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
the event that we had to go all the way back and clear and do the forgiveness to that event, to my dad, to myself, even for, probably being a naughty little girl for not listening to my dad. But clearing that and having the relief that I can trust men today. Like, I'm safe. So that's the type of stuff that we're talking about. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be a huge trauma. It can be as simple as, you know, even for myself, when my kid falls, I'm like, well, you deserve that. I told you not to do that. You deserve it.
Right,
But
exactly.
yet it creates trauma for them, right?
Yeah, right. Well,
So,
and I want to just say this to all the mothers out there that have created trauma for your children, because we all have, and we all
yeah.
had our parents create trauma for us. There's no way to avoid that. What's so
Yeah.
great is that all of our children and all of us can
Yeah.
process with that now as adults. We don't have to live with the stuck
Yeah.
patterns that
Yeah.
were learned, that we learned as child. Those
Hmm.
patterns were important for the child. The child
Yeah.
needed to learn that,
Yeah.
not to wiggle when you're on dad's shoulders. You needed to learn to listen to dad when he says, don't do that, I'm going to drop you, that he's telling you a truth,
Yeah.
right? You kind of needed to, we needed to learn those things as children.
Yeah.
It's just that we learned the lesson we needed to, and then we learned this other thing that maybe we didn't need to learn. But as
Yeah.
parents, we can't stop our children from learning that stuff,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
It's just, it happens because of the developmental period that they're in.
Yeah.
And so there's this wounding that happens and this
Mm.
scarring that happens.
Yeah.
And the good news is that those wounds and those scars can be
Hmm.
healed. If they weren't, are no longer useful to us in the way in which they healed in the first place. They can be
Yeah.
healed as adults. And
Yeah.
that's the thing that I just want to bring, that level of
Hmm.
hope. Like, yeah, we all have these childhoods that are
Yeah.
riddled with these adverse experiences
Yeah.
that could maybe were big traumas. Like my
Yeah.
parents divorced when I was 2, my father left. That's
Mm.
a big trauma. Like, it's a big
Yeah.
wound. It's complex. There's a lot of
Hmm.
scarring around that. I've had to do a lot of work to heal that. And
Mm.
for many years, it affected me dramatically.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it doesn't anymore, because, or very rarely, it's
Hmm.
because I've been able to go back and heal all those
Yeah.
wounds, and give the forgiveness and give the understanding
Yeah.
for my child self,
Hmm. I would
as
say
well as the other
that,
people involved.
yeah. And would you say, like, I know for me, Cindy, it has, like, I would say I probably have had at least 50 plus sessions personally or more. I can't even keep track, right? It's almost like a blur.
Yeah. Hmm.
And my daughters notice mom's changed. Mom is a
Yes.
different human being. And the other day, my daughter's like, I can't tell if you're happy or sad. That's what she said to me.
Hmm.
You just
Hmm.
are so calm, because mom would react with either going off the deep end and being like, what the, why that,
Right.
tripping over stuff, the dishes, getting mad, shouting, dishwasher, like, oh my God, here comes crazy mom, right? Like, my crazy mom is coming. And then either then I would like shut down, because now there's the guilt and the shame for the pattern that I, noticed.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, and then I wouldn't say anything. And so the girls have just known mommy to be like this. And so now mommy's
Right.
like this. So the dishwasher, I'm like, or the kids don't put their dishes away. You know what mom does? I just load it up in a green bin and put it in their bedroom. And when they get home in 2 or 3 days, they know that they have to do the dishes and I can't see it. And I'm like, eh. And some moms will freak out and say, oh my God, you put dirty dishes in a bin in their room. And I'm like, yeah, I do. Because I'm not
Yeah.
going to wash their dishes. So finding solutions in a calm way versus a crazy way. Does that make
Right.
sense? Yeah?
It it makes a ton of sense to me, because that was my experience also. And in fact, I have been so calm in the last several years, and my family definitely notices.
Yeah.
They think, oh well, now that you're in menopause, it's because of that. They don't really give
Oh,
it credit to rest, because I
yeah.
guess I've been doing it well, but I don't know why. But
Yeah.
I did a test of that recently,
Okay.
because it's in menopause, right?
Yeah.
And so I was kind of starting to buy that. I was like, well, maybe it is that my
Mm,
hormones aren't fluctuating anymore, that I'm in menopause, there's the
yeah.
stability of my hormones.
Yeah.
And then I was feeling really not great, so I decided to
Yeah.
see my naturopathic doctor. This is
Okay.
this year, recently. See
Okay.
my naturopathic
Yeah.
doctor again to do a hormone check, because I was like, I think my hormones must be off. I could probably do
Yeah.
something about it.
Okay.
So I got the whole hormone panel, to see what was wrong.
Mhm.
And yes, in fact, my estrogen was insanely low, my
Yeah.
progesterone insanely low, like
Okay.
lower than what it is
Yeah.
low for
Yeah.
postmenopausal women,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So she prescribed some progesterone and estrogen, and I decided I would do the hormone replacement. Well, there was some mistake, and I don't know where it was. I don't think it was with my doctor, but she put on a treatment plan a low dose of estrogen patch for me.
Mm-hmm.
The dose of estrogen patch that I got from the pharmacist turns out was 10 times as much. So I
Oh,
didn't notice that until I had been wearing that patch with 10 times as much estradiol as I was supposed to be getting
yeah. Yeah.
for at least 48 hours.
Okay.
And so you know how I said before, it's like those hormone fluctuations
Yeah.
is what caused us to be raw.
Yeah.
Well, I was starting to feel, and the reason I noticed it at all is because I'm starting to feel in my body all this kind of craziness happening. And I'm like,
Okay.
in the past, I would have felt that craziness and then I would have acted crazy, right? Like
Yeah.
the dishes, like
Yeah.
everything would have irritated me. I would have been in the sort of same kind of rage you were describing. That's
Yep.
what would have happened to me in the past. This time, I'm like noticing that and I'm like going, huh, I'm just not feeling good. Like what could be wrong? And
Yeah.
I was just having a more sort of I'm curious about what's going on response
Right.
to the way my body was feeling really
Yeah.
unsettled. It was feeling a little like anxiety. And I'm like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
have anything to be anxious about. I don't know why my body's feeling like that. I'm
Yeah.
kind of headachy. I don't know why, like all
Yeah.
those symptoms.
Yeah.
And so instead of like throwing the tantrums like I used to do,
Yeah.
I just had brought this level of curiosity and I started
Mm.
thinking, it's odd a couple of things that were odd. And I said, let me just check what that treatment plan was. Let me just check what the label is on the stuff.
Mm.
And then I went and looked and I'm like, there's a discrepancy. So there now I know the reason why I'm feeling so odd
Yeah.
has to do with the fact that I just kind of OD'd myself a little bit on estradiol. And I also
Wow.
know that that's going to wear off. And I'm just like so calm about it, Nicole. And in the
Mm.
past, I would have been just like you. Like I would have had that hormone fluctuation and
Yeah.
I would have been all kind of nervous about what was going on with my body, but it would
Yeah.
show up in me like not being able to be tolerant of the fact that, my husband and my kids are leaving their mail all over and they're not
Yeah.
putting away their dishes and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Wow, that's fascinating.
it's really rest. It's the moral
Yeah.
of the story is
Yeah.
the reason why I think I've been able to maintain that calm, even though now the hormones are fluctuating
Yeah.
like insanely,
Yeah.
and I can still maintain that sense of wisdom and equilibrium and
Right.
equanimity, and
Yeah.
it
We
feels
were
really good.
It's so good, eh? Let's talk.
Yeah,
You and I were talking before the podcast just about that conversation about heading into these years and how our brain does shift. Can you
yeah.
provide the audience a little bit about that conversation that we had about menopause and the brain and what shifts, and then how do we need to shift as a woman understanding these changes?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, you know, and it shifts with, all hormonal fluctuations,
Yeah.
but the hormonal fluctuations of perimenopause and menopause are big hormonal fluctuations that
Yeah.
take place over kind of years. And
Yeah.
what happens is when our hormones are in flux, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a functional medicine doctor, so I'm not going to be able to tell you which hormones do what
Yeah.
thing, but
Yeah.
they all interact. Estrogen, progesterone, all of those, they interact with your nervous system, with your brain, as well
Yeah.
as controlling all kinds of other things in your
Mm-hmm.
physiology. So,
Yeah.
but one of the things that they do, and I think estrogen especially is very interactive with your brain, but
Mm-hmm.
progesterone too, when they are at different levels, your brain actually operates differently
Mm-hmm.
because you have more or less access to different parts of your mind. So,
Mm-hmm.
most of us when we're younger, we're kind of taught in our culture, especially,
Yeah.
right, to just think quickly, get stuff done, like
Yeah.
think through things logically, think quickly, let's get stuff done. You know, there's not a lot of honoring of
Mm-hmm.
our sort of gut feelings, our emotions, like
Yeah.
none of that information, intuitive
Mm-hmm.
information coming up from the body or our emotions is really not
Mm-hmm.
honored in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know about you, but I was really taught how to use my logical mind
Yeah.
to navigate my world. and to kind of stuff all of those other feelings,
Yeah.
those other sort of information, stuff it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so when that I was going through hormonal fluctuations, and I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, this even happened as, pre, with before I would have my period. Every time
Yeah.
I would have hormonal fluctuations, I would kind of
Yeah.
lose my mind.
Yeah.
And to a large extent, I was just, that's normal. And my husband would go, "Oh, you're gonna have your period," like that.
Yeah.
You guys remember
Mm-hmm.
that? It's like just blame it on the hormones.
Yeah.
But
Go
when I
run. Mom's getting her period.
right,
Lock your
exactly,
doors.
right. Exactly. Mom's having a hormone day. Yeah, but see, and while it is true
Yeah.
that your brains work differently, you don't have as much access to that logical sort of what I kind of think of as a masculine kind of way of thinking.
Yeah.
And instead, what you have is the wisdom of the body, the wisdom of intuition, the wisdom of our emotions. But if you've never learned how to use that information, it just kind of
Mm-hmm.
comes up as overwhelm. I'm like trying to get rid of it all the time, right?
Yep.
Like, and if
Yeah.
you keep pushing it down, like you guys all probably recognize
Yeah.
this, you keep pushing it down, it kind of keep pushes back up. It's like, no, you are not
Yeah.
going to push me down, right? Like
Yeah.
you are angry,
Yeah.
whatever. And so there was always this sort of like push it down, like you push it
Yeah.
down. And I think that with rest, because I was able to shift and reprocess some of
Mm-hmm.
those old patterns that were
Mm-hmm.
showing up in that context,
Mm-hmm.
I was able to start having access to the physiological body's information, the intuition, the emotions,
Mm.
not because they weren't just being driven by a past. We have to react this way because we reacted this way before and it worked.
Yeah.
Once that's sort of cleared, that compulsion is cleared, then you have access to this intuition and wisdom where you can use that information from your body to kind of guide you. You can bring this
Mm.
level of curiosity
Yeah.
to that information coming in from those sources
Mm-hmm.
that allows you to integrate that in then with
Yeah.
the um, logical mind to go,
Right.
and I think that that is what we have access to. Honestly, for women, like it's a blessing, like it's that I
Mm.
think makes us, dare I say, superior, but it just makes us special.
Right. Yeah.
Like it
Yeah.
really is a special access, but
Yeah.
we have to take control over how we process with the past. We have to take control over
Right.
how we learn how to use that information. And it really is just learning how to use the physiology of the brain that you've been given
Right.
in and I think we demonize like those hormonal fluctuations.
Mm.
We feel victimized by
Right.
them. And I think that actually they can be gifts if we allow
Mm.
ourselves to accept them
Right.
and process with that old that comes up as automatic so it doesn't
Yeah.
come up as automatic so that we can then have access to this information and then
Mm.
see the gift in the menopause, see the gift in the hormonal
Right.
fluctuation, see the gift in what we've been given as women,
Yeah.
which is this beautiful brain that's
Mm-hmm.
very integrated and very wise and just has this huge capacity.
I love
So
that. So
that's what I
beautifully
wish
said.
for all women to be able to see that in themselves and access that for
I
themselves.
I mean, I do have to say that, I feel like I have fast forwarded my life in all areas because of the work that I did on the trauma work, the deep work, the work
Yeah.
that so many people, we call it like the dark shadow. Um, the exercises that we did in school, one of my favorite ones was the character. Who's the character that shows up, right? That makes you crazy. What's her name? What does she look like? How does she dress? And then who's the superhero, your inner hero? And I love that exercise because as I grew, as I healed, as I was able to close the door on things that were holding me back,
Hmm.
the crazy person inside, I don't know what I called her, Belinda, let's say, she doesn't really show up that much anymore, right? Like it's almost like I was able to say, thank you. Thank you for protecting me. Thank you for the gifts that you provided. But it was almost like I had a breakup with her, to say, like, it's almost like the baton was passed. And then the superhero
Nice.
now has come to light. And so for those of you who have been watching my journey, and you will see, the change, the transformation, it doesn't happen overnight. It's an investment in myself and willing to do the hard work, and to be willing to be vulnerable and to release the level of mask that I have worn over the years. But I tell you, it's been the best thing that has happened to me, because I don't know if I would be here today, even doing this podcast, because it was sitting on my desk before I even started the rest program. And the little voices in my head is, you're too busy, you're not good enough, you don't have a radio voice. Technology even scared me. Like even today, I had to pivot a little bit on technology, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not on my big mic, I'm on my small mic. I'm going to let people down. They're not going to hear my voice as much as I want them to hear. And all that stuff is kind of dissipated to say, and I just swear, but fuck it. Like let's just show up and figure it out, because there's a bigger purpose, a bigger mission. And Dr. Cindy, I just want to say, thank you for your bravery. Thank you for listening to your inner nudge of being able to get this to market and to share with so many. And I got goosebumps all over, because I know that you've changed so many lives today, and you're going to continue to change so many lives, where you are literally got this beautiful gift that you can share with the world, to help us open the door to trauma, heal it, and close the door, and really show up as your best version of yourself. So thank you for the gifts. I know we're going to be wrapping up here, but talk a little bit, because there will be obviously health professionals that will be listening to this talk today. If they're curious, if they're like, oh my gosh, maybe I should look into rest, maybe I should try it, maybe I should, I do Reiki 1, Reiki 2, maybe I should get certified, maybe I want to take the basic. Can you just talk a little bit about the offerings that are available, in case somebody is curious about looking into rest and maybe being a coach?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I don't know if you're going to provide a URL for somebody to go to look into it more deeply. Um, but at Rest Inc., we are offering both rest sessions that coaches like yourself can do. I mean, I know you can provide rest sessions as a
Yeah.
coach.
Mhm.
That's certainly available for those
Yeah.
people who are interested in learning how to be a coach, whether it's
Mhm.
because you want that to be part of an already existing practice, or you want that for yourself, for your families. There's
Yeah.
a lot of reasons why someone might do that. You can go to rest with 2Rs.com and find, it says be a coach,
Yeah.
I think, and find out the programs that we offer. We offer a 4-month certification program. The next one is starting in January. And then we
Okay.
offer an advanced course program
Yeah.
that will be following that, which is a 7-month program. So
Yeah.
together they're taking just a little bit more than a year.
Yeah.
And those two programs together are a very solid foundation for being able to
Yeah.
provide this work to clients. And you'll
Mhm.
also learn how to apply it to yourself. And it's just, it's been a blessing in my life, and I think it sounds like in your life too. And one of the things, Nicole, I want to just say before I forget it, I loved your imagery of a superhero. And that's something that you're bringing to this that is, a little bit even beyond, I think, what we taught in our program. So I just want to say, I appreciate that. I appreciate that you're doing that for yourself, bringing her into your awareness, and then
Mhm.
sharing your superhero self with all of us. But I'm going to
Yeah.
use that. If you don't mind, I'm going to borrow it, because I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of value in us identifying the superhero within us, and really honoring, respecting, and nurturing that part of ourselves. And so thank you
Yeah.
for
Oh,
sharing that with all of us.
oh, you're
And
so welcome.
I think that, the rest programs do offer a big foundation for all of us to access our best selves. And then from there, create the kind of magic that you're creating here. And I just want to say thank you for creating this magic here. I think this whole conversation about aging and menopause for women and all of that is such an incredibly important conversation. And I have not heard it anyplace else, Nicole, in the way that you're doing it with such just authenticity and bringing in experts and all of that. And I just want to say thank you for that too. I want to really honor that you are giving such a gift to the world
Well,
and
thank
being
you.
a model superhero human and doing that. Thank you.
I mean, it feels so good, getting in tune to that wisdom, that inner wisdom, that slowing down. It's like, what's the next? What's the nudge? And I guess my message as we close off this is that, we all have that superhero in us. And somewhere along the lines, we lose her. And I just encourage all of you that are listening is to do the work that is required to find that beautiful superhero. Because more than ever, the world needs us to show up as truly the best version that we can be. And I can say that it's worth the hard work. Rest is one tool for me that has accelerated the superhero. But of course, there are many tools in the toolkit that we can be using to show up as that superhero. And that's why this podcast will continue to offer you these tools so that you can layer on and show up for the world the way that the world needs you. So thank you, Cindy. I'm so grateful that rest is available. We will definitely drop in the show notes information to go directly to the rest website to look to see if you want to be certified like myself and Cindy. If you just are looking for a rest coach, I do limited bookings with clients, specifically in my Menopause Reset program. I do a lot of referral. I just had one yesterday of a mom that wanted to work with a child that was 14 years old. And the great thing about our coaches is a lot of us get into niching, to focusing on a certain area. And so I'm able to then forward that request to that coach that maybe specifically is working with a child with anxiety. And I'm grateful for our community, and that's what our community is about. I think I referred you just recently to a mother-daughter as well that I just, it's out of my scope. I mean, I could have worked, but specifically about, a brain injury, which you are such an expert in. So that's our community. We make sure that we're getting you in front of the right person, right coach to support you. Thank you, Dr. Cindy Sholes, for tuning in today. I know this episode is going to just hit a lot of hearts, brings a level of compassion, and make women think about their superhero.
Yes, I love that. I love that Tinkerbell said, I will be alive if you believe in me. So I, believe in your superhero self.
So good. So good. Thank you,
you,
everyone. I want to say thank you for listening to today's episode. If this message landed for you, make sure to leave a review and tag me, Nicole Scott at Gorgeous Gray Movement, and make sure to share with your friends. You can head over to my free Facebook community, Gorgeous Gray Movement, or subscribe to my YouTube channel for more inspiring interviews. If you are still struggling and need additional support, you can take a look at my website, nicolescott.ca, and learn more about my new Menopause Reset program that I'm so excited for. Until next time, ladies, be well and own your sparkle.